Who were the Nabateans, and what role did they play in the biblical narrative? You may know that Petra was the capital of a powerful Nabatean kingdom adjacent to Israel that gained its wealth and power from the trade of spices from India and China. Although not mentioned directly in the Bible, the Nabateans nevertheless played a role in the biblical narrative, both in the Old and the New Testaments. Let's start by going to Petra. It's very dramatic. There's this narrow canyon that you go through with very high walls on both sides that open up into the city of Petra. And if you haven't been there, you probably have seen Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, because they use that entrance into Petra for part of that movie. It was known as the Lost City, discovered in 1812 by Johann Burckhardt, and this is a drawing by David Roberts that was done in 1839. So the news would have spread throughout Europe about this incredible discovery of Petra, and people wanted to go see it. So look at the tiny little figure of a person standing down there. That gives you a sense of how massive this structure is. And it's carved out of the sandstone rock. It's really a very impressive place to visit. Now, what made Petra so powerful was their control of the spice trade. Now, the red line up at the top is the Silk Road. And the Silk Road is not what the Nabateans were using, but the Silk Road was an overland route to China and India where they could get the spices. But the Nabateans were using a sea route. So from India and China, you see that red line there, ships would come to Yemen, and there they would be transferred to Nabatean boats at Yemen and would come up here, the Red Sea, and then from there they would go to Petra. From Petra, it would go in two directions. It would go overland to Gaza, and from Gaza could go across the Mediterranean Sea to other European countries. Or it could go north to Damascus, and that would link up with the Silk Road. And from there, of course, it would go west into Europe. There were two things that was coming. One was spices, because the food in the ancient world was very bland. Of course, it was for the wealthy. Common people couldn't do it, but the wealthy certainly were very anxious to get these spices. Here's cinnamon that comes from the bark of a tree, cardamom seeds, and you pulverize the seeds and you get kind of a powder. Ginger is, these spices are very common today. I have cinnamon, cardamom, and ginger in my kitchen. And turmeric. I use turmeric a lot. Now, in addition to spices, there was also the things that gave an aroma. Very important place for aroma was in the temple. And frankincense was used in the temple, and so was myrrh for an aroma, a sweet aroma that floated up to God. Now, I want to take a closer look at the Nabatean trade route because Avdat, you see Avdat there in the middle. Over on the left, you'll see the picture of once it comes to Petra, they're going overland. And from Petra, they would go to Avdat and then over to the Gaza Strip. So Avdat was a one-day trip from Petra to Avdat and then a day from Avdat to Gaza. This is an aerial view. It's on a somewhat elevated site, which is very common in the Near East because it gave them protection. Very interesting in Avdat, they carefully managed the water supply and had elaborate drainage systems that were constructed to collect every ounce of rainwater and channel that rain into family or public cisterns. And in Avdat, there were 4 wine presses. This is just one of them. The central pressing area was surrounded by these small storage rooms, apparently used by the farmers who brought their grapes to this press. After being pressed, the grape juice would flow through the channel into a central collection pit So the ability of the Nabateans to produce such large quantities of grapes, I mean, this is incredible. The quantity of grapes in this arid area is a remarkable testimony to their ingenuity. And wine was very important, not as an alcoholic drink, but the water was not safe to drink unless it came directly out of the ground. So let's see, I want to take a look now at Nabateans in the Bible. We see Ishmael, Yishmael in Hebrew, was Abraham's son, whom Hagar the Egyptian, Sarah's maid, bore to Abraham. The sons of Yishmael were the origin of the Nabateans. They settled from Havilah to Shur, which is east of Egypt, as one goes toward Assyria. So the map shows you the area, the Arabian Peninsula. Petra was not built this early. At this time, the Nabateans were simply nomads, wandering nomads. That's what they were. And here we have to Esau, God is saying, I gave Esau Mount Seir, and I circled Mount Seir. So now the Edomites are these nomadic tribes that are going to become the Nabateans. Now, the reason that the Nabateans were so successful in the trade route is that they could go over desert areas in their camel caravans. Now, the Edomites are going to be the Nabateans. When Saul, now we're talking about Saul, the first king of Israel, had taken the kingdom over Israel, he fought against all his enemies on every side. Now, first comes Moab, those are the Moabites, and then the sons of Ammon, those are the Ammonites. Those are the Philistines here on the coast. And finally, the Edomites. And here are the Edomites, who are the desert Bedouins who are forming into some kind of a collected nation, still Bedouins. Now, we also see them in the story of David. In all Edom, David put garrisons, and all the Edomites became servants to David. So this is the beginning of intense hatred on the part of the Edomites against the people of Israel, because they had become servants to David. They were subjected to David, added to David's kingdom. When David died, his son Solomon became king. And we read that Solomon ruled over all the kingdoms from the river. The river would be referring up to the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. And then Egypt would have its river, the Nile River. They brought tribute and served Solomon all the days of his life. So this is a great source of wealth for Solomon. Solomon was very wealthy. Part of his wealth came from conquered areas that had to pay him tribute, because they had been conquered and had to pay him tribute. There's Edom. David had conquered the Edomites, and then Solomon took over, and tribute was having to be paid to Solomon. So let's continue with Solomon. The Lord appeared to Solomon in a dream at night, and God said, "Ask what you wish me to give you. Behold, I have done according to your words. I have given you a wise and discerning heart." Now that's what everybody knows. But what a lot of people don't know, I have also given you what you have not asked, both riches and honor. And I have highlighted riches because Solomon became extremely wealthy. And there are reasons for this. What made Solomon so rich? Well, we've just seen that he has all this tribute money coming from vassal states. He also heavily taxed the people of Israel itself. And they're telling Rehoboam, your father made our yoke hard because he made us pay taxes, he made us work. Now therefore lighten the hard service of your father and his heavy yoke which he put on us, and we will serve you. Now Rehoboam did not lighten the yoke. He continued to make the people work and to make them pay taxes to his kingdom. And that, of course, led to the revolt of the northern tribes and to the division into two kingdoms, Judah in the south and the kingdom of Israel in the north. Now there was a third way that Solomon became very rich, and that is tolls collected on the spice route. There was intense hostility, not only about the Edomites to Israel, but now Israel against the Edomites. And that had to do when the Assyrians had conquered the northern kingdom of Israel and taken them into captivity, but Judah escaped until the Babylonians took over the Assyrian Empire, and they now came down to conquer Judah. And when they did, Edom allied with the Babylonians, And we read, at the fall of the first temple, Edomites attacked Judah and looted the temple, accelerating its destruction. We read, one of the prophets is Obadiah. He says, behold, I will make you small among the nations. You are greatly despised. Oh, how Esau will be ransacked. Now, Esau is referring to those Nabateans, all right? And his hidden treasures searched out. You will be covered with shame and destroyed forever. The day of the Lord draws near on all the nations. As you have done, it will be done to you. I have to give you some definitions. First, we have Idumea. Idumea is the name given by the Greeks to the land of Edom, which is where the Nabateans are going to be, and they're the Edomites. Then, another thing you need to know is the revolt of the Maccabees. The revolt of the Maccabees was Jews revolting against Greek rule. Judas Maccabeus became the leader of those who were revolting against the Greeks. Now, the Hasmonean dynasty is what was set after the revolt of the Maccabees. So when the Greeks were thrown out, the Jews set up a Jewish kingdom, and the rulers of that kingdom were the Hasmoneans. They were descendants of the Maccabees. And so it was an independent Jewish state for about 100 years until the Romans came in and took over. John Hyrcanus was a ruler of the Hasmonean dynasty. Now, you're going to need to know that as we go into how the Edomites were forcibly converted to Judaism. And this we find in Josephus' writing. Hyrcanus took also Dora and Marissa, cities of Idumea, and subdued all the Idumeans. So the Hasmonean kingdom conquered the Idumeans. Hyrcanus permitted them to stay in that country if they would circumcise their genitals and make use of the laws of the Jews. Why would they want to stay in the country and be subjected to circumcision and being ruled by Jewish laws? Because if they didn't, they would have been sold into slavery. And then Josephus continues, the Idumeans were so desirous of living in the country of their forefathers that they submitted to the use of circumcision and the rest of the Jewish ways of living, at which time thereafter this befell them that they were hereafter no other than Jews. Now, this is important because Herod the Great, that you all know about, was born in Idumea. His mother was a Nabatean from Petra. His father was Antipater, the Idumean, whose ancestors had converted to Judaism before the conquest by Hyrcanus. And that's important because when Hyrcanus came in and forced everybody to become Jews, Herod's father was already a Jew. And which is why Antipater became a high-ranking official under Hyrcanus. Now, Herod was the son of Antipater. He was raised as a Jew, but the Jews never considered him a legitimate member of the people of Israel. Okay, now let's take a look at Paul. We read in Damascus, the ethnarch under Aretas, the king of Nabatea. All right, the Nabateans, the Romans allowed them to be independent as long as they were allied with Rome. They became very powerful. Of course, they gave tribute to the Romans. And their king, he apparently was allowed to be the ethnarch of Damascus, which was a city controlled by the Romans. So in Damascus, this ethnarch under, let's call him Aretas, was guarding the city of the Damascenes in Damascus in order to seize Paul. I was let down in a basket through a window in the wall and so escaped his hands. So who were the Nabateans? They were descendants of Ishmael and Esau. They settled in Edom. David conquered Edom. Solomon taxed the spice caravans. Edomites allied with Babylon to destroy the temple. Herod the Great was an Idumean, and Paul thwarted the Nabatean governor in Damascus. So that's how the Nabateans enter into the biblical narrative. With that, I wish you shalom.